I never thought heartbreak could smell like coffee and old books. But there I was, sitting on a cracked park bench, watching the man I once called mine disappear into a taxi with nothing but the ghost of a smile. I laughed bitterly at myself. Maybe tragedy does come with a sense of irony. I remember the day he left me. Detective Ethan Blake, tall, with that sharp jawline that somehow softened whenever he smiled at me, had held me like I was the only thing keeping him tethered to the world. But the world was calling him back to a past I didn't belong in. My phone buzzed with his final text. I need to find myself. Don't wait for me. I reread it like a mantra of my own inadequacy. The city was alive, indifferent to my misery. Chicago's autumn air was crisp, the kind that makes your lungs ache pleasantly while leaving leaves spinning like confetti around your feet. I had nowhere to go, and honestly nowhere I wanted to be. I wandered into a small, dimly lit bookstore on a corner of Lake Street, drawn by the scent of old paper and something unnameable, like hope wrapped in dust. That's where I met him, Professor Julian Carr, a man who looked more like he belonged in a university lecture hall than in the aisles of a used bookstore. His hair was slightly tousled, like he had been thinking too hard about something beautiful. His eyes, a piercing shade of gray, seemed to look straight through the grief I was carrying, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel invisible. You look like someone who could use a story, he said softly, tilting his head toward a shelf stacked with novels that had survived decades. I've read all the stories that matter, I muttered, my voice a little too harsh even to my own ears. He smiled, patient and gentle, as if he understood the armor I wore without me needing to explain it. Maybe not the right story yet. I shrugged, but something about the way he spoke made the air feel warmer. I picked up a book, its cover faded and corners worn, and noticed that Julian's hand brushed mine as he handed me a bookmark. That tiny contact sent an unexpected jolt through me, reminding me that I was still capable of feeling. For weeks, I found myself returning to that bookstore. Julian and I would talk for hours about literature, philosophy, and the absurdities of life. He had a way of asking questions that made me examine myself without shame, as if he could see all the cracks in my heart and still think I was worth attention. Meanwhile, memories of Ethan haunted me like shadows at noon, too obvious to ignore, too painful to endure. I had loved him with everything, and losing him felt like someone had ripped the sunlight out of my world. He had left not because he didn't love me, but because he was chained to his past, to choices and regrets that I could never untangle. Every time I thought of him, a pang of bitterness and longing stabbed through me, making the world seem grayer than it was. Julian was different. He never asked me to forget Ethan. He only asked me to let myself breathe. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to. It wasn't immediate. Healing never is. But the warmth of his presence, the kindness in his words, the small ways he acknowledged my pain without pity, it was transformative. One rainy evening, after closing the bookstore, Julian invited me to a tiny cafe down the street. We sat at a corner table, the kind with peeling paint and a view of the wet pavement outside. The rain drummed softly on the window, and the city's neon lights blurred into streaks of color. I felt exposed, like my grief had been stripped down to its rawest form, and I hated it. But Julian reached across the table and covered my hand with his. Do you remember the first time you read something that changed you? He asked. His voice was steady, calm, yet there was a hint of mischief in the corners of his mouth. I shook my head. Books don't change people. They just remind you of things you already feel. Maybe, he said, eyes locking with mine. But sometimes the right story can help you forgive yourself. And that's the first step to letting someone in. I wanted to laugh at the poetic sentiment, but instead, I felt the tight knot of grief in my chest loosen slightly. It was a strange, terrifying feeling, hope sneaking in like an uninvited guest, yet somehow welcome. Over the next few months, our friendship grew into something fragile but undeniable. Julian was patient, never pushing, always observing, always listening. The night he first kissed me, it wasn't the culmination of longing or desperation. It was quiet, deliberate, tender, a moment that felt like it had been waiting for both of us. like the universe had folded us into its own secret plan. The city seemed to notice our closeness. Strangers on the street, the barista at the cafe, even the neighbor walking his dog all seemed to subtly acknowledge the unspoken bond growing between us. And with each acknowledgement, I began to reclaim pieces of myself I thought were lost forever. But shadows of my past with Ethan never fully disappeared. I still stumbled across reminders, his favorite coffee shop, the park bench where we used to talk for hours, the scent of his cologne lingering in old jackets. Each encounter was a jolt, a reminder of the love I had lost and the man I still carried in my heart. Julian never pressured me to forget. Instead, he helped me reframe those memories, to see them not as chains but as experiences that shaped who I had become. It wasn't easy. Healing never is. There were nights I cried alone, nights I questioned if I was capable of loving again, nights when I wondered if I was betraying the love I had once felt. And yet, Julian's presence was steady, a lighthouse in my storm. He didn't promise perfection, only understanding. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, casting amber light across our favorite park, Julian turned to me with a seriousness that made my heart flutter. "You don't have to choose between your past and your future," he said. "You can honor what you've lost and still embrace what's ahead. Love isn't a zero-sum game." I wanted to argue, to tell him that love wasn't that simple, but his eyes, filled with patience and warmth, silenced me. In that moment, I realized that maybe love didn't demand perfection. Maybe love was simply allowing someone to walk beside you through the ruins of your past, holding your hand while you learned to stand again. And as I looked into Julian's eyes, I saw not just a man who had helped me heal, but a mirror reflecting the best parts of myself, parts I had forgotten existed in the shadow of heartbreak. I understood then that love wasn't about replacing what I had lost. It was about finding someone who could walk with me forward, into a life that still held laughter, light, and possibility. The first time we stayed the night together, it wasn't just physical closeness that made it profound. It was the trust, the vulnerability, the willingness to let someone see all the broken pieces of your heart and still want to stay. Julian's touch wasn't just comforting. It was affirming, telling me silently that I was worthy of love, not despite my scars, but because of them. And slowly, imperceptibly, the weight of Ethan's absence began to ease. Not because I had forgotten him, but because I had learned to live alongside the memories, to treasure the lessons without letting them dictate my happiness. The first time I saw Ethan again, it felt like the city itself had conspired against me. I was walking along Michigan Avenue, the sun glinting off the glass of skyscrapers, when a familiar voice called my name. I froze, heart hammering. There he was, Detective Ethan Blake, sharper than ever in his uniform, the same intensity in his eyes that had once made me feel invincible and, at the same time, completely exposed. He looked at me, hesitation flickering across his face before he masked it with a confident smile. "Hey, it's been a while." A while? I wanted to tell him it had been an eternity, that every heartbeat without him had been measured in heartbreak, but the words lodged in my throat. Instead, I nodded, forcing a polite smile. Julian was just behind me, holding the strap of my bag lightly, his presence a quiet anchor in the storm that Ethan's arrival stirred. Ethan's eyes flicked toward Julian, a subtle shift in his expression that I couldn't quite read. Curiosity, irritation, regret. "I didn't expect to see you here," I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt. "Yeah, I'm back in town for a few days," Ethan said, glancing around as if the city itself reminded him of memories he wasn't ready to confront. "Can we talk?" I glanced at Julian, whose hand had not left mine, fingers entwined. His gaze was calm, unwavering, but I could feel the unspoken question. "Do you want to?" I hesitated. Part of me ached to see Ethan, to feel that familiar warmth, the sense of home I had lost when he left. But another, stronger part, the part that had grown through grief, through long nights of introspection and moments of quiet healing, wanted to protect the fragile world Julian and I had begun to build. I don't think now is a good time," I said finally. Ethan's expression faltered, and I saw it. The man who had once made promises, the the man who had chosen to return to a past instead of building a future with me. He nodded slowly, understanding or pretending to. I see. Maybe. Another time. As he walked away, a rush of emotions hit me all at once. Nostalgia, sorrow, and a surprising surge of relief. Julian squeezed my hand, and I realized how much I had relied on his steady presence without even noticing it. That night, we walked along the lakeshore, the city lights shimmering on the water. Julian didn't say anything at first. He never needed to. His silence was comforting, a reminder that he didn't need to fill the space with words to make me feel safe. Finally, he spoke. He's still part of your story, Julian said gently, but he doesn't get to be part of your future unless you let him. I wanted to argue, to say that life wasn't that simple, that emotions weren't easily compartmentalized. But as I looked at him, at the unwavering sincerity in his eyes, I realized he was right. Healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing who you wanted to walk beside you from this point forward. Over the next few days, Ethan's presence in the city was unavoidable. We crossed paths at a coffee shop, a grocery store, even the small bookstore where Julian and I had met. Each encounter was like a jolt, a reminder of the love I had lost and the person I had once been. Ethan tried to reconnect, sending messages, showing up where he knew I might be, and each time I felt torn. Part of me wanted to reach out, to feel that connection again. But every time I touched my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen, I felt Julian's hand on mine in memory, the warmth, the patience, the love that was here, tangible and real. One evening, Ethan cornered me near the lake, the wind whipping through our coats as if the city itself were holding its breath. I made a mistake, he said, voice strained. I left because I thought I had to, but I realized, I still care about you. I want to make things right. I felt anger, sorrow, and a strange sense of pity all at once. You care? You left me. You walked away. Do you know how much that hurts? I know, he said, his hands running through his hair in frustration. But I can fix it. Just give me a chance, please. I shook my head, tears threatening to spill. You can't fix the past, Ethan. You can't take back the nights I cried, the times I questioned my worth because you weren't there. I've tried to hold on, but I can't anymore. Julian was there then, seemingly out of nowhere, his presence like a protective shield. He didn't speak, just stood beside me, hand lightly resting on my shoulder. His calm strength contrasted sharply with Ethan's desperate energy. Ethan looked between us, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Who is he? He's the one who stayed when I needed someone, I said simply. He's the one I love. The rejection hit Ethan harder than I expected. His jaw tightened, and he finally seemed to understand that no words, no gestures, could reclaim what had been lost. He nodded slowly, a mixture of resignation and regret on his face. I understand. After he left, Julian and I walked in silence for a while, the city around us alive yet strangely intimate, like it had shrunk to just the two of us. I finally let myself breathe, the weight of the past loosening its grip. In the following weeks, our relationship deepened in ways I hadn't anticipated. Julian introduced me to his favorite spots in the city. A quiet rooftop with a view of the skyline at dusk, a hidden cafe where poets read their work, a small pier where the water reflected the stars in impossible clarity. Each place became a memory we shared, a testament to love built on healing and trust. One night, under the soft glow of string lights on his apartment balcony, Julian turned to me with a small smile. I want you to know something, he said, voice steady, intimate. I don't want you to love me because I'm easy, or because I filled a void. I want you to love me because you see me and I see you. All of you. Past, scars, everything. I felt tears prick my eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of being understood and accepted completely. I do see you, I whispered, and I think I'm ready to love again, fully. Julian leaned in, our foreheads touching, a gentle electric connection that spoke more than words ever could. The city lights flickered in the background, a soft symphony of life moving forward, indifferent to the pains and joys of those living within it. As weeks turned into months, we built a life together that felt like a sanctuary. I returned to the bookstore often, not as a visitor seeking solace, but as someone who had learned to embrace joy. Julian and I would spend hours talking, laughing, planning trips, dreaming of futures we once thought impossible. And somewhere in the back of my mind, Ethan's memory lingered not as a wound, but as a lesson. He had been a chapter, an essential part of my story, but he was no longer the protagonist. Julian was, and for the first time in years, I felt that the love I held in my heart was not fragile, but enduring. One rainy afternoon, as we walked hand in hand through the park, Julian paused and looked at me with that intensity that always left me breathless. "Promise me something," he said, rain dripping from the brim of his coat. "Anything," I replied, heart skipping. "Promise me that no matter what shadows the past casts, we'll face the future together. That we'll choose each other, every day." I nodded, pulling him close, feeling the warmth of his body and the certainty of our love. "I promise, every day." The rain fell around us, soft and steady, washing away the remnants of grief and regret. We laughed, the sound mingling with the city's pulse, and I realized something profound. Love, real love, wasn't about perfection. It was about courage. Courage to open your heart, to trust again, to allow someone in despite the risks. And with Julian, I had found that courage, and more importantly, I had found home. Life with Julian wasn't free from challenges. There were days when my past with Ethan flared up unexpectedly, memories triggered by a song, a scent, a corner of the city, but each time, I felt stronger. We faced those moments together, communicating, supporting, and understanding. I learned that love wasn't the absence of pain, but the ability to navigate it together. One evening, we hosted a small gathering of friends from the bookstore and university, a celebration of community, laughter, and love. I watched Julian interact with everyone, his eyes sparkling with the same warmth and compassion that had first drawn me to him. In that moment, I realized how far I had come from the hollow days after Ethan left to this vibrant, full life with someone who truly saw me. As the night wound down, Julian and I stood on the balcony, city lights twinkling below. He slipped his hand into mine, fingers interlacing effortlessly, and whispered, "Thank you for letting me in." I smiled, leaning my head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you for staying," I replied, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed in love, not the fleeting kind, not the painful kind that leaves scars, but the enduring kind that heals, strengthens, and transforms. Together, we had moved beyond the shadows of the past, embracing a future bright with possibility, laughter, and unwavering devotion. The city continued its endless hum below us, oblivious to the stories of heartbreak and healing unfolding above. But on that balcony, hand in hand with Julian, I realized that love, true love, was the most profound story of all. Spring arrived in Chicago with an almost reckless abandon, painting the city in shades of green and gold, and with it came a sense of renewal that I hadn't felt in years. Julian and I spent long afternoons walking along the lakefront, feeling the warmth of the sun on our faces, laughing at the mundane absurdities of life, and sharing quiet, intimate moments that solidified the bond between us. It was during one of these walks, with the soft breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers and the distant murmur of traffic, that Julian stopped and looked at me, eyes shining with a mixture of mischief and tenderness. "Do you realize how far we've come?" he asked, voice low, almost reverent. I laughed softly, the sound airy and light, feeling the weight of the past finally lifting from my shoulders. "I think I do," I admitted. "From heartbreak to this, it almost feels like a dream." He reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "It's not a dream, it's real. Every day we choose each other, and that makes it real." For the first time, I didn't feel the pangs of fear that had haunted my love life for so long. Ethan's memory had become a quiet presence, not a tormentor. I had learned that some chapters exist to teach you, not to trap you. And Julian had been my teacher, my guide, and my anchor. Life moved forward in its own unpredictable rhythm. I returned to my bookstore, now more confident in myself and my ability to embrace joy. Julian continued his work at the university, inspiring students with his passion for literature and his gentle wisdom. Together, we carved out a space for love that was both tender and resilient, a sanctuary from the chaos of the world outside. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long amber shadows across our favorite park, Julian surprised me with a small picnic. He had packed it himself, complete with my favorite snacks, a soft blanket, and even a bottle of wine. "I thought we could celebrate the little things," he said, his eyes twinkling in the fading light. We sat together, side by side, the warmth of his body a comforting contrast to the cool evening air. As we shared stories, laughter, and glances that spoke volumes, I realized how profoundly my life had changed. I was no longer the person left shattered by Ethan's departure. I was whole, nourished by love, trust, and the courage to open my heart again. "Do you ever think about the past?" Julian asked suddenly, his tone reflective. I paused, considering my answer. "Sometimes, but not to dwell on it. It's more like a reference point, a reminder of how much we've grown, how much we've learned, and how lucky I am to have found you." Julian smiled, leaning his head against mine. "I'm the lucky one," he whispered. "You trusted me enough to let me in, even when your heart was fragile. That means everything." As night fell, the city lights flickering like distant stars, we lingered on the park bench, hands intertwined, sharing a silence that was more eloquent than words. It was in that quiet, amidst the hum of the city and the soft rustling of leaves, that I understood the depth of what we had. A love forged in vulnerability, strengthened by patience, and affirmed through shared healing. Weeks later, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Ethan, his handwriting familiar and deliberate. He wrote of his reflections, his regrets, and his hope that I had found happiness. Reading it, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: nostalgia, sorrow, and a sense of closure I hadn't anticipated. For the first time, I could think of Ethan without pain, without longing, only a quiet understanding that our paths had diverged for reasons that neither of us could have avoided. I shared the letter with Julian, who listened patiently, his hand resting over mine. "It's okay to acknowledge the past," he said softly, "but it doesn't define your present or our future." I nodded, a sense of peace settling over me. The past had been a teacher, Julian a guide, and together, we had written a new story, one filled with hope, laughter, and unwavering love. As summer approached, we planned a small getaway to a cabin outside the city, a retreat into nature where the air was pure, the nights were silent, and the only sounds were the whispers of trees and the gentle lap of a lake. There, away from the bustle of urban life, we celebrated our love in its simplest, most authentic form. One evening, beneath a sky awash with stars, Julian took my hand and led me to the edge of the lake. The water reflected the heavens above, a mirror of infinite possibilities. "I want to ask you something," he said, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. I looked at him, heart pounding, anticipation mingling with the deep, abiding love I felt for him. "Will you continue this journey with me?" he asked, kneeling in the soft grass, holding a small, velvet box. Inside was a ring, simple yet exquisite, a symbol of commitment and enduring love. "Will you marry me?" Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming joy and certainty that this was the man I had been waiting for, patient, kind, and unwavering. I laughed, a sound full of relief, happiness, and love. "Yes," I whispered, my voice trembling, yet resolute. "Yes, I will." Julian's face broke into a radiant smile, and he slipped the ring onto my finger. We embraced, the world around us fading into insignificance. In that moment, nothing else mattered, neither the heartbreak of the past nor the uncertainties of the future. Only the here and now, the love we had cultivated, and the promise of a shared life ahead. Returning to the city, we began to plan our wedding, a small, intimate ceremony filled with friends, family, and the community that had supported us. The bookstore became a hub of laughter and celebration. Julian's students sent messages of congratulations, and neighbors joined in, curious and delighted at the love story unfolding before them. On the day of our wedding, the sun shone brightly over Chicago, the sky clear and full of promise. I stood at the altar in the cozy corner of the bookstore we had chosen as our venue and watched Julian approach. He looked as breathtaking as he had the first time I met him, his eyes reflecting a love so profound that it left me breathless. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. We exchanged vows that spoke of trust, resilience, and a love that had survived pain and grown stronger because of it. When Julian slipped the ring onto my finger, and I did the same for him, I felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly brought me to my knees. Through heartbreak and healing, through the shadows of the past and the light of the future, I choose you, I whispered, my voice unwavering. And I choose you, Julian replied, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. We sealed our vows with a kiss, soft and tender at first, then deepening with the unspoken promises of a lifetime together. The small gathering erupted in cheers, but for a moment, all I could see was Julian, his face radiant, his hand warm in mine, his love steady and unshakable. In the weeks and months that followed, we settled into married life with a rhythm that was comforting, joyful, and full of adventure. We traveled, explored new corners of the city, and spent quiet evenings reading, laughing, and simply being together. Our love was not without challenges, but every obstacle felt surmountable because we faced it hand in hand. Ethan's memory remained a quiet part of my life, like a chapter that had concluded with grace and understanding. He had taught me about loss, longing, and the complexity of the human heart. Julian had taught me about love, patience, and the courage to open oneself fully to another person. Together, the lessons had woven the fabric of my life into something richer, fuller, and infinitely more beautiful. One rainy afternoon, as Julian and I watched the city through the window of our favorite cafe, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, from heartbreak to healing, from despair to profound joy. Life was unpredictable, often cruel, but it was also capable of immense beauty. And in Julian, I had found a love that transcended pain, embraced vulnerability, and celebrated the human capacity to heal and grow. As the rain fell softly outside, I reached for Julian's hand, feeling the familiar warmth and certainty. "I love you," I said simply. "I love you too," he replied, his voice steady and filled with the same unwavering devotion that had carried us through every storm. And in that moment, amidst the hum of the city, the patter of rain, and the quiet intimacy of our shared life, I understood something fundamental. Love, true love, was not about perfection. It was about choosing each other every day, in the face of uncertainty, fear, and the echoes of the past. With Julian by my side, I knew that no matter what challenges awaited us, we would face them together. Our love had been tested, refined, and ultimately strengthened by everything we had endured. And as we sat there, hand in hand, hearts aligned, and spirits entwined, I realized that I had found not only love, but a home built not on circumstance, but on trust, understanding, and the courage to embrace life fully, together. The city continued its endless rhythm outside the cafe windows, indifferent to the stories unfolding within it. Yet in that small corner, amidst the soft hum of conversation, the aroma of coffee, and the gentle sound of rain, Julian and I existed in our own world, a world shaped by love, resilience, and the unwavering promise of tomorrow. And for the first time in my life, I knew with absolute certainty that I was exactly where I belonged. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.